Commanders, the whole thing falls apart. I mean, other than that game, I was actually doing pretty well. I want to say it was, 8 of 9 on picks other than the Lions one. But, yeah, obviously that was a huge pillar that this entire bracket was riding on. So with them out, I'm out of the running. This can no longer be a winning bracket. It is obviously lost and wrong. I picked the wrong champion, and that's the end of that. I did get the AFC Championship game correct. At least I got the Bills over the Ravens in this one. But, yeah, tough sight. And moving into the script bracket, we'll see that this one is definitely still up for grabs. In this one, I had the Chiefs beating the Eagles in the Super Bowl, and that is very well a matchup that can still occur. Obviously, with the Chiefs hosting a playoff game this weekend and the Eagles hosting a playoff game this weekend, we could see it pan out. Now, I did get more things wrong in this bracket, one being that in this version I had the Ravens beating the Bills, and in this version I had the Buccaneers beating the Commanders. So obviously, the Commanders one is way off because they've climbed up all the way to the NFC Championship Game, and the reason why I had them losing in that first round was because just for matchup, it would have forced the Rams to play the Lions in the second round of the playoffs, and I figured if there was an NFL script, that is more likely what they would do. And then, yeah, in the AFC side of things, the reason why I had flipped the Ravens game is because I had thought that the Ravens had a worse shot of beating the Chiefs than the Bills do. So, in my mind, if the Ravens were the ones to advance from this game and they were to play the Chiefs, I think that the Chiefs are winning that matchup. And yeah, so I think with this bracket, I am currently ranked 444,480. I have now fallen to the 61.4 percentile. So I've slipped quite a bit. Obviously, there are numerous errors in this one. There's already 4 errors, but the final result can still be correct. And yeah, that's where we stand on the bracket now. Moving into the actual predictions for this weekend, we're going to start with the first game of the weekend. This is going to be Sunday at noon if you're on the West Coast, at 3 p.m. if you're on the East Coast. It is the number 6 seeded Washington Commanders taking on the number 2 seeded Philadelphia Eagles in a divisional rivalry game. You know, we've seen this game play out twice over the regular season. In the first iteration of this game back in, I have it, let's see, back in November, it would have been week 11, I want to say. Yeah, week 11. We had the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Washington Commanders 26-18. Now, that wasn't, you know, the way that the game panned out the entire time. The Eagles actually scored 20 points in the final quarter of that game to win it. Heading into the fourth, it was just 10-6 in favor of the Commanders, and then there was a lot of scoring in the fourth quarter to clinch it for the Eagles. The other game played by the Eagles and Commanders this season went in favor of the Commanders. It was a shootout that the Commanders won on a last-second touchdown, taking it 36-30. And this is another one where the game was pretty much won in the fourth quarter. Heading into the fourth, the Eagles had a very comfortable 27-14 lead over the Commanders, but then the Commanders would score 22 points in their final period, outscoring the Eagles 22-6 to clinch that game. Now, one of the biggest things people will point out about that second matchup is the fact that Jalen Hurts did not play for the entire game. He was sidelined with a concussion, I believe, after the season in a year where, they finished with 4 wins last year. They added rookie Jaden Daniels. They hired Dan Quinn as their head coach. I was not expecting this to be at all in the realm of possibilities for them. Early in the offseason, I had them being the worst team in the NFC East. Later on, I got convinced that they would be the second worst. I still thought that the Cowboys finishing with a losing record would still be slightly above them. But their 1-year turnaround has been unprecedented and very impressive. It is one of the most shocking things I have seen. Obviously, we had kind of a similar situation with the Lions last year, where you have a team that has had a very historically difficult time finally turn things around and make a deep postseason run in a year where people weren't quite expecting it to that extent. I think that the Lions, they exceeded people's expectations last year for sure, and with them going all the way down into the NFC Championship Game, it was like putting the world on notice. Very much the same thing that the Commanders are doing this year. I think a lot of people discounted them, a lot of people counted them out of even the playoff picture. Now, not only have they gone into the playoffs, but they've won 2 games, and they've won them in glorious fashion. So far, the Commanders, what they're doing on offense this year is really impressive. They do not punt. That is their philosophy this year. When it comes to all-time teams that do not punt, they come number 4. Now, there are a lot of recent teams ahead of them. Number 1 all-time being the Kansas City Chiefs from 2021. They punted 2.5 times a game. Then you've got the Lions this year, 2.56 times a game. The Cowboys from last year. And then finally you've got the Commanders from this year. But this is an all-time ranking of teams in history, the ones to punt the fewest. And you've got the Commanders on here. So they just took down the other top dog that was on this list. They are great with the football. I mean, their offense just moves the ball down the field, and even when it doesn't, they go for it on 4th down. It makes them very hard to play against and very hard to scheme against. Most teams, you're used to them only having 3 plays to get 10 yards, and now that you have a team that actually utilizes all 4 plays, it changes all your schemes. It changes everything that you're doing on 3rd down, on 4th down, and the Commanders have done a great job of that. But another thing I want to touch on is the fact that, so if you're not punting the ball, that means you either have to turn it over on downs or turn the ball over for the other team to really see it. And they're doing an exceptional job in the playoffs so far of not doing either of those teams either. So far in these playoffs, the Commanders have 0 turnovers. They have not turned the ball over even once against the Buccaneers, nor against the Lions. And their 4th down conversion rate is very high. They are 6 of 9 so far in the postseason, and I think it was even higher in the regular season. They are killing it when it comes to just keeping the ball in their hands. So that makes for a difficult situation for the Eagles, because obviously the Eagles do punt the ball. So how are you going to beat this team that is offensively so good and is playing so well? Well, if we go back a little bit and we take a look at their 2 games this year, we will unfortunately find that the Commanders have turned the ball over 7 times in their 2 matchup with the Eagles. Obviously the first time it was a lot less. It was just 2 turnovers in that first game. I want to say it was 1 Jaden Daniels. Yeah, 1 Jaden Daniels interception and 1 fumble. But then in their second game against the Eagles, it was 2 Jaden Daniels interceptions and 3 fumbles. So that totals to 7 turnovers in their 2 games against the Eagles. So even though they've been playing really good recently, and that would be somewhat worrisome for the Eagles, I think this is an Eagles team that knows they can make the Commanders uncomfortable at times and force their hand to make some mistakes. Now, if we take a look at the other side of things, how has the Eagles offense been as far as generating, or not generating, but in turning the ball over in these games? Not nearly as bad. In fact, all Eagles not named Kenny Pickett in the 2 games against the Commanders this year have 0 turnovers. Kenny Pickett did have an interception in that second matchup, but as far as I know, he's not going to make an appearance in this game against the Commanders. So, all of a sudden you see that there is one way in which the Eagles could maybe have this game script turn in their favor if the Commanders don't like to punt. That's an advantage to them. But if the Eagles can force turnovers, that's an easy way where they could actually have an edge over the Commanders. Now, another thing that is going to be a big focal point in this game, I mentioned that last week, I have to mention it again, it's got to be Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, an offensive juggernaut for this Eagles offense. They've completely reshaped what it is that they do around him. And, they don't really throw the ball all that much anymore. The Eagles this season, they finished bottom 5 in passing offense in terms of passing yards a game, but they finished number 2 in rushing offense, second to only the Ravens. So if we take a look at their last 2 playoff games, the first one being against the Packers, the second one being against the Rams, and we just think about how much Saquon accounted for their offense in those games. In the Packers game, Saquon Barkley was responsible for 42% of the offensive production, which it's kind of a large number. 40% of your yards coming off of one guy is pretty big. Then you take a look at what he did in the game against the Rams, and it's even more shocking. Saquon accounted for 66% of the Eagles' offense in the game against the Rams. So 42 in itself is already high threshold. Then he adds another 24% on top of it. So, in my mind, with the Commanders, obviously, if you're not turning the ball over thus far, so if you can keep the ball safe, that is one way that you can win the game. The other way that you can win the game is if you can get Saquon Barkley off the field. As long as you can stop Saquon, you do have a chance of beating this Eagles team, because they haven't shown that they can really throw the ball all that much through the air. Jalen Hurts is not having an impressive year, and it is a big question mark that people are circling. Can this Eagles offense produce if it's not coming through Saquon Barkley? So, if we take a look at the games, can the Washington Commanders reasonably stop Saquon Barkley? And just based on what it looks like, the answer is no. I've mentioned in the sports betting videos that the Commanders' defense isn't the best ranked against the rush. And we definitely see that in the last 2 games against the Eagles. The first game against the Eagles this year, the first game against the Eagles this year, the Commanders allowed Saquon Barkley to have 198 total yards and 2 touchdowns. In the second game, the one where Kenny Pickett was in, obviously they relied a little more on Saquon early, and even through the stretch of the game, he didn't have as good of a game, but he still did have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. 150 of those coming on the ground, and I think in the first one it was like 146 on the ground, the rest of the air. And look, I don't know. I don't know if you can reasonably beat the Eagles if you are on average allowing Saquon Saquon to have like 148 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. That's pretty close to what he's been doing in these playoffs. I don't think his game was that good against the Packers, but his game was slightly better against the Rams, and that is just too much power to give up to one player. And then, if we look at how these two ranks in terms of offense and defense, I would say that the Washington Commanders are the better offensive team. That has been proven. They were a top rushing team. They were better as a passing team. But if you actually break down their offensive weapons, aside from Jaden Daniels, I think I would take every positional group on the Eagles. Jaden Daniels this year, definitely a much better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts 2 years ago, maybe you can have a discussion, maybe you can have a fun hypothetical discussion, but this year, no question, Jaden Daniels has been doing it better. But when it comes to the offensive line, Eagles are one of the best out there, so I would take them. When it comes to the running back room, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, these are all solid guys, but I don't think that they compare at all to just Saquon Barkley alone. So I take the Eagles once again. Receiver room, what the Commanders are able to do with the receivers they have, it's very impressive. Terry McLaurin, obviously a breakout year. He's been good, and now he really had his first great season, and he's leading this room that has him, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Jamison Crowder. These are all solid guys. But the Eagles, just on paper, the receivers that they have in A.J. Brown, obviously this year, give me Terry McLaurin. Possibly A.J. Brown did miss a little time, but Terry McLaurin this year. As for just a receiver, A.J. Brown is still the better receiver. I would still say so. Look at A.J. Brown's production last year versus Terry McLaurin's production this year. I think you would still take A.J. Brown. It comes to wide receiver 2, you've got Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith is a lot better than the second guy on the Commanders, I would say. I mean, De'Ami Brown is breaking out now. Zaccheaus has had some great games. But Devontae Smith is like Heisman winner. Third wide receiver. Yeah, you can give the Commanders' third wide receiver the nod over John Dotson if you'd like. But I do think wide receiver group, I'm still taking the Eagles. And then you get to tight ends. Neither team has that impressive of a tight end collection or display. But the Commanders are technically playing with the Eagles scraps. Zach Ertz used to be the tight end for this Eagles team. Way back, a few seasons ago, stints ago, before Arizona, before Washington. He used to be the guy for them. Now they have Dallas Goedert, and they have Grant Calcaterra, and Zach Ertz is good at times. Their other guy, I forget who it is, Bates and Bensono. I don't think of them. They're about on the same field as Grant Calcaterra. So straight up Dallas Goedert versus Zach Ertz. I know that Zach Ertz has turned up a couple times in this year, but he's old. I would rather take Dallas Goedert. So positionally, I think that the Eagles have a lot of good players. And then when you get to the defense, there's no real question about it that the Eagles have a better defense. They were number 1 in total yards allowed per game this year. And in the passing game, both defenses are almost evenly stout. The Commanders, they had a great secondary. I think they ranked 3rd in passing yards allowed per game this season. So I have to give them the nod there. Commanders' defense against the pass is good. But the Eagles, they have an even better one. They were number 1 against the pass this season. Not to mention, the Eagles don't even really throw the ball. Obviously having a top 3 secondary and top 3 passing defense is nice. It's important. But we've already established, the Eagles don't win the games through the air. They win them on the ground. And that's where the Commanders' defense struggles the most. And then, when we actually think about how the Commanders have had success in this postseason, against the rushing attack. But both the Lions and the Buccaneers have a bottom 5 passing defense. The Eagles are number 1, so this is going to be a completely different game than we've seen so far. Jaden Daniels has been able to throw it like all over the field with relative ease. He has not thrown a pick. I think a lot of those things might change in this game. Turnover differential isn't anything that crazy for the Eagles. They're plus 11. The Commanders are plus 1. I don't think of that as like a huge indication that Jaden Daniels will necessarily turn the ball over through the air like that. But I do think that it's going to be a lot harder for him to pass the ball with the level of success that he's had in his first 2 games. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this, breakdown, I think that this team is pretty similar to the Lions last year, where you have a team that does really well in the regular season in kind of an unexpected way. I know obviously the Lions 2 seasons before that, they were like 3 and something, then they were just outside of the playoffs, and then they went into the playoffs as the 3rd seed, so they did have that middle year, whereas the Commanders did not. They went straight from bottom of the league into the NFC Championship Game. But I do think it's kind of a similar Cinderella-esque story of a team that has had a bad franchise, that has been historically very poor, has not won a playoff game in a while, has not been to a NFC Championship Game in like forever, and now it's like, it's such a big swing. They've gone from like historically nothing to like, they're right there, they're about to get to the Super Bowl, and they're playing an opponent who's been right there for a minute. Last year, the Lions played against a 49ers team that recently has been playing in NFC Championship games and recently has been in the Super Bowl, and that's the exact same case with the Eagles. The Eagles, since their win against the Patriots in 2018, they've been in the NFC Championship Game, and they went to another Super Bowl where they lost to Patrick Mahomes, and now they're back in the NFC Championship Game. This is a team that recently has been doing this and has more familiarity here. And then you've got the Commanders, who are like obviously very excited. They're having a brilliant season. First playoff berth in a while, first playoff win in a while, first NFC Championship Game in a while. But it's like, to overcome all of these one after another, it is a lot. And we saw the Lions fall in this situation last year, and I think it's going to be a similar thing for the Commanders this year. So all in all, though I personally would not mind at all seeing the Commanders in the Super Bowl, I think it would be really cool, and I hope that they're able to not turn the ball over and keep Saquon contained. But personally, I don't know how much of that can happen, so I'm going to go with the Eagles winning over the Commanders in the NFC Championship Game. Now, coming into our second game and our final game of the playoffs before the Super Bowl, this is going to be the AFC Championship matchup between the number 2 seeded Buffalo Bills and the number 1 seeded Kansas City Chiefs. A game that's going to be played in Arrowhead, and I think this is a matchup that a lot of people have been looking forward to from midpoint in the season, from the end of the season, the beginning of the season. You kind of know that the AFC runs to the Chiefs. Everyone knows that. The last 5 years, the last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, I forget how long their streak is, but they keep winning the AFC West, they keep making the AFC Championship Game, and it's just a matter of, are they going to three-peat this year or not? That's what's been on everyone's mind, and it feels like out of the AFC, there are really only 2 teams that were going to be able to challenge them, the Ravens or the Bills. Now, the reason why in my bracket, in my script bracket, I had the quarterbacks in the league in Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes when they face off. And I do understand the Ravens aren't in this game, so I don't need to be talking about it. But I will build to the point that I'm making. And I think just as two guys that are at the top of the league, they get framed as like a rivalry. But I think if we actually take a look at the success that Lamar Jackson has had against the Chiefs, it's not a rivalry. It's not at all a rivalry. So far, Lamar Jackson is 1-5 against Mahomes and the Chiefs in his career. Like, even though he has 2 MVPs, even though you could take a look at the entire NFL and say, clearly Mahomes is the best and Lamar is 2, or even if you were to go ahead and say that Lamar is the overall best quarterback in the league based on the years he's had last year and this year, it is undeniable that Patrick Mahomes gets the best of them in the regular season matchups. And some of them have been close. Sorry, not even regular season, even in their postseason. He is 1-4 against Mahomes in the regular season. He is 0-1 against him in the postseason. So it's not a close call whatsoever. And yeah, some have been like, at the end of the game, close losses. It's been like they've gotten away from him. But neither in the regular season nor in the playoffs does Lamar really have success against a guy like Mahomes or against this Chiefs team. And I think that's kind of important because, like, if the Ravens were to have made this game, I think that mentally they don't really know if they can beat the Chiefs. Obviously, every fan, every player is going to say, yeah, we're going to go into that team and we're going to beat them. But have they done it? Not really. Not with much success at all. And I think that's where this Bills team is different from the Ravens. The Bills, in their matchups with the Chiefs, if we take a look at Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes in the last 8 games, it's two different sides. Obviously, the regular season and the playoffs are 2 different ball games completely. Josh Allen against Mahomes in the regular season is 4-1. Patrick Mahomes against Josh Allen in the postseason is 3-0. So one clearly wins more when it matters most. But overall, these two guys are dead even. It's 4-4 in the overall matchup. And I think that is kind of huge. Because, like, obviously the Ravens saying that we can win, that we can play in a Super Bowl, that all has to come by beating the team that is going to be at the top. You know that the Chiefs are going to be up there waiting for you, and you have to prove that you can actually beat them. And the Ravens haven't done that. The Bills haven't been able to do that in the playoffs, that's for sure. But in the regular season, they do have their number. And at least, I think the Bills would know, or the Bills would believe, that they can beat this team. And so, that's kind of big, just in terms of matchup. The whole reason why I had the Ravens losing for sure against the Chiefs in my script bracket is because I don't know if anyone in that building has a strong feeling they can do it. Obviously, you only lost by like an inch to the Isaiah Likely toe, but it's more so in my mind that the Ravens have aspirations to get past the Chiefs. That is the biggest hurdle. The Bills, they actually have shown that they can topple the Chiefs. They just can't do it in the postseason. Now, these games that the two teams have played in their last 5 matchups, it's been very close. These are all one-possession games being decided by an average of 5 points. Well, I guess not all one possession. Earlier this year when the Bills did beat the Chiefs, it was by 9 points. But that's a different game than this game. This game is going to be played in Arrowhead. The game earlier this season was played at Orchard Park. The Bills' home field advantage. So we have to consider what happened last year. Obviously, these two teams went toe-to-toe 3 times in the postseason. The Bills have lost every single time. The Chiefs have won every single time. And last year was the most recent iteration of this matchup, and we saw a 27-24 victory by the Chiefs. In that game, the Bills played nearly perfect. Josh Allen, he threw no picks. He was sacked 0 times. They even had a lead going into the final period, and they gave it up. So, not great. You see that you're right there, and you still can't do it. But I do think that, defensively, the Chiefs showed out last year. They went on the road. They were able to show off how good their defense was, holding Josh Allen to just 186 yards passing and keeping him more or less in check. Oh no, never mind. They kept James Cook in check. They kept James Cook to only 61 yards in that game. But I don't know if that's going to be the same story this year. The Chiefs this year, they were pretty good against the run. They were actually really good against the run in the regular season. And I thought that was something that was going to translate in their first playoff game last week against the Texans. But they allowed Joe Mixon to have a decent amount of success on the ground. He was able to gain 88 yards on 18 attempts, a 4.9 average, which is not bad at all. But I think the thing that was most concerning, well, I don't know if it's concerning. I don't think Chiefs fans are ever concerned, if I'm being honest. But I think the thing that is most intriguing, if you're a non-Chiefs fan, is the fact that they allowed C.J. Stroud with a bumpy knee to amass 42 yards on the ground on 6 rushes. 42 yards, and he's not really known for being that big of a scrambler. Obviously, he is mobile, and he can get yards, but he banged up his knee on one of the first plays of the game, and he got 7 yards a rush after that. He's not even a real rushing quarterback. Josh Allen very much is a real rushing quarterback, and in their last game against the Chiefs, he had 72 yards. In the game before that, in the playoffs, Josh Allen had 68 yards. And I think that, year in and year out, Josh Allen does get a decent number of rushing yards. Yeah, the time before that, 88 yards. Whenever they match up in the postseason, Josh Allen is going to be running for a decent amount. He's going to get 60, 70, 80 yards probably. But I think the Bills' rushing attack this year, compared to all other years before it, is better. They are better as a rushing team. We have seen Josh Allen pick it up and run, but their rushing is at a more refined state than it has been in prior years. Last year, James Cook was kind of coming out. This year, I think that he's fully developed. He was playing at a near Pro Bowl level, even though he didn't get the nod. I do think that the Chiefs aren't going to be able to make Josh Allen the only guy to beat them on the ground. And then what else? Last week it was the Chiefs' rushing attack. I also think is at an all-time low. If we're just going band for band on what their offenses look like, it's a lot more questionable. Last year, the year before, they had Isaiah Pacheco, who in the regular season was kind of fine, and then in the postseason he was really good. They would give him the ball a ton. He would get 100 yards. And Pacheco, since breaking his bone and coming back, he has lost a step. He has not been nearly as productive. Then you've got Kareem Hunt, Samaje Perine, but these guys are incredibly inefficient. And in the game against the Texans, the Chiefs only averaged 2.2 yards per carry, which is not ideal at all. So I do think that the Bills have a big advantage when it comes to the rushing game. Also, by the way, I'm recording without the Darth Vader sound maker noise, and so if you hear noise, offense and through the passing game. There, I would say that the Chiefs still have the big upper hand. As a passer, yes, Mahomes, maybe not his best year, but if you actually take a look at who is on this offense, you've got Travis Kelce, you've got Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, you have DeAndre Hopkins, you've got Juju Smith-Schuster, Noah Gray. There's a lot of pass catchers. Now, in the game last week, Juju Smith-Schuster, DeAndre Hopkins, and Hollywood Brown all combined for a total of 0 yards. So outside of Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy, there is no imminent threats. But that could change. I think, literally, that's the stuff. Literally any one of those guys could pop off with, a 50, 60-yard game. And, yeah, they do have... I'm not going to call Juju a weapon. He's kind of an afterthought. But DeAndre Hopkins has had some good games for them this season. Hollywood Brown has had some good games for them this season. They have guys. The Bills' offense is more ragtag. Something that we've seen Lamar had success with in previous years. Josh Allen this year had a lot of success with a bunch of guys who are there. Khalil Shakir. I'll throw him a bone. I'll say that he's pretty good. But I think the other guys on the offense, Amari Cooper has been somewhat disappointing. You've got Mac Hollins, who is surprisingly reliable, but it's also Mac Hollins. Not to dog on him, but it's just you don't expect him to be a certified contributor, and he is on this offense. And then you've got Curtis Samuel. It's a bunch of guys who can make plays, and they have been making plays all season, but I don't think of them as really game-changing types of players. They're all guys that if they all step up and do their part, they can come in a strength in numbers type of feel. But I'm not expecting one of these guys to have a absurd giant game. Maybe Khalil Shakir out of anyone. Oh, they also have Keelan Coleman, I didn't forget. But yeah, and then in their tight end group, Kincaid and Knox, they're both decent, but I think even in his current state, I would still definitely take Travis Kelce, especially after the game he had last week. And yeah, so I'd say through the air, yeah, the Chiefs still better as a team. On the ground, though, the Bills for sure. So when it comes to other aspects of this game versus previous games, let's take a look back at their matchup this year. And that was one in which Josh Allen did have a turnover. And I think that's also going to be a big point of emphasis in this game. Who can play cleaner football? I've kind of been saying it all year for both teams. The Chiefs' wins haven't been all that pretty, or razzle-dazzle. They are mostly winning by just executing and relying on the other team to make mistakes. And I think in all previous years, that is a strategy that would definitely work against the Bills, because the Bills, they do turn the ball over. And in the previous game this year, Josh Allen did throw an interception. It was one of his only 6 interceptions. And that was one of the few mistakes that he made. But on a season-long scale, the way that Josh Allen has handled the ball this year, I think is very impressive. I think more so than the passing yards or the rushing yards. The biggest improvement in Josh Allen's game this year is his ability to limit the turnovers. If we take a look at Mahomes and Allen head-to-head in their careers, there was only 1 year prior to this one in which Josh Allen had less turnovers per game. That was in 2021. 2021, Mahomes had an insane number of turnovers. He had 20 turnovers in 20 games, averaging to 1 a game. Josh Allen in that year, he was slightly below it at 0.95. He played 19 games and he turned the ball over 18 times. So you can see it's kind of neck and neck. This year, the improvement from Josh Allen last year to this year, just for reference, last year Patrick Mahomes Mahomes had 18 turnovers, and this year he had 11. So he went from 0.9 to 0.65 in turnovers per game. Josh Allen last year had 22 turnovers, averaging 1.16 turnovers a game. This year he has 8. He is at 0.42. He has nearly cut his turnover rate by a third. Like, not a third, by 2/3. And I think that is, like, kind of big. Maybe you think it's more than kind of big. I think that, like, obviously it's not that reliable because he did turn the ball over against the Chiefs earlier this year. So anything can happen. But I think that that's a big factor. And now if we take into account their defenses, the Bills' defense, on the other hand, is great at generating turnovers. They're the best of any team this year, with a plus 24 turnover differential in the regular season. If you take a look at the Chiefs this year, they are plus 6. So that's a difference of 18 turnovers over the span of the year. That's a turnover a game. And just last week, the Chiefs, though they got the win, they didn't force any turnovers. And the Bills, they forced 3 turnovers on the Ravens. Let's see, which team had the most giveaways this season? The Bills had the least, and the Ravens were third least. The Ravens on the season had only given the ball away 11 times, and they gave it away 3 times last week. So I think in years prior, a big flaw of this Bills offense was there's no one to really complement Josh Allen in the running game, and you can kind of bank on them turning the ball over, and that's probably what's going to have them lose a game. Obviously, that wasn't the case in the last postseason game because they didn't turn the ball over, they didn't sack, and they still lost. But that is something that, like, you're always worried about. Maybe it affects how you're throwing the ball, running the ball, and things like that. This year, they're great at generating turnovers, and they're great at keeping the ball. How many giveaways did the Chiefs have? Chiefs had 14. I mean, that's also pretty low. So, it's a slight advantage. I think compared to years prior, it's more so. I feel like the teams are pretty even. It's not anyone clearly better than another. I think the real thing here is, like, of all the years that these teams have faced up, I think this is probably the best chance Buffalo has had. This is the cleanest football they've been playing. This is the best season that they've had as far as, like, I think scoring. They've been really good at scoring 30 points per game, and their defense has been questionable at times. But you could say the exact opposite about the Chiefs. Their defense has been really stout, but their offense has been questionable at times. They're not very good at scoring. I think that they balance each other very well, and I think that they complement one another really well, and they both execute at a very high level. So it really is kind of a toss-up. I honestly could see either team advancing, and it would make perfect sense. The Chiefs obviously have home field advantage. It's going to be hard for a team to go into Arrowhead and defeat them like that. We saw the Bills beat them earlier this year, but that was at home. Playoff game on the road is hellish. It is hard. It is not easy to do. But I also think that, like, these two teams have been trading blows in season, out of season. They're at 4-4. And I think at some point or another, the Bills are going to get it. I believe in the Ravens like that. I don't think that the Ravens can come out into the postseason and get this thing that they've never even been able to really do in the regular season. Lamar to beat Patrick Mahomes in the postseason would be kind of a far-fetched thought for me. They just always kind of fall apart. They abandon their philosophy. They don't do well. But now that we have Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, a guy who can beat Mahomes, they're dead even. At some point or another, a team is going to beat the Chiefs. Maybe it's not this year. postseason. It's been very close. Lost by 3 in this game. Lost in overtime the last game. They've been right there every single time with the lead. And I think that they are playing a much more, controllable offensive game of football. And I'm going to give them the slight edge. And I'm going to read what I saw. I'm going to see what happens. I think in general rule of thumb, it's bad. It's a bad idea to predict against the Chiefs. Every time I do it, I feel like it flops. Last year, I thought that the Ravens could win everything. Obviously, they couldn't. And I'm playing it by ear, just based on what I've seen. And yeah, maybe this will come back to bite me on me. And it's not even necessarily that I am against the Chiefs winning this game. But I wouldn't mind if someone else had a shot. And I think that this game will be very close. I think it'll be one of those where it's decided in the last minute, last two. It could be anyone's game. And I want to say that the Bills have a chance. So I'm going to go with the Bills winning the AFC Championship Game this year. And that would set us up for a Bills versus Eagles Super Bowl. That's what I'm predicting. Obviously, if we do all the permutations that the Super Bowl can be this year, it could be Chiefs versus Eagles. It could be Chiefs versus Commanders. It could be Bills versus Eagles. And it could be Bills versus Commanders. I know some people have said that like a Bills Commanders Super Bowl would feed families, feed generations. And I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind. Even if we have to run it back with Chiefs Eagles, I think that would be interesting. Chiefs Commanders, I think, would be a true, villain versus underdog story. I think that there's a team that's really super discounted. It would be like Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker against Darth Vader. It truly is the epitome of bad versus good in my mind. I mean, I'm vilifying the Chiefs a lot. But Jaden Nato is such a charismatic young gun that has done so well this year. And then you have the Chiefs who are looking to loom on a three-peat. It would be interesting. Any Super Bowl matchup would be cool. But the one that I'm going forward with is going to be the Bills and the Eagles. So, yeah. And that's all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, please feel free to share your thoughts and feelings and opinions in the comments below. I genuinely do enjoy being challenged. I try my best not to be disrespectful, and I think that maybe escaped from me a little bit in the last video. So I'll try and do a little bit better. But yeah, thank you for keeping me accountable. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you